I'm Kimberly Adams. I'm from Los Angeles originally, California.
Let's begin with your life and growing up and life in California. Hollywood. What was it like growing up?
I was 20 minutes out of Hollywood, just above it.
Okay.
So might have gotten in a little trouble. It's pretty easy to do that. I lived in Santa Clarita Valley, and that was actually where most of the child stars lived. So I grew up with that, which was weird. Honestly, it was weird. I remember, I think I was probably 11 when our mall opened, and there was like the mall stretched across the street, and there was a whole area for Botox and, all that stuff at like 10, 11 years old. I'm like, that's what we do, right? You do that.
I guess it was the beginnings of all the cosmetic industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. To
Yeah.
beautify ourselves.
Yes, definitely. Which,
Hey. Yeah.
many ways to be beautiful.
Definitely.
And just an interesting way to grow up, though, for sure. Because I think friends that didn't leave really locked into that sort of way. of
Right.
being.
You think that's what happened? Like you get swept up in that being the norm?
I think so, because I was quite an active kid, and I broke my foot, and I went to the doctor, and at that time I was wearing like a big flowy skirt, and he's like, "You don't belong here. You belong in Northern California." So I was just a little kind of crunchy, groovy girl.
Well,
Yeah, my mom getting me in a dress, that was a feat.
so tell me about your family a little bit and what was that like?
Sure.
Family
Yeah.
dynamics.
So I have an older sister. She's 5 years older, Stacy. And my mom and dad stayed married until my mom's passing, that's 40 years, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, and my mom stayed home with us until I was 13. So my sister was almost at the house by the time, my mom went back to work. And my dad worked in Hollywood, kind of.
I was about to ask, so like, did you want to ever get into acting or that scene or that world?
So my dad had three brothers, and they were all in the studios.
Wow.
So just as extras and that kind of stuff. But no, my sister was a model. My cousins were models, and
Wow.
so I was the young one going, something seems weird about this. And it didn't. And my dad worked in photography, and
Mm.
so he was always trying aiming at a camera at us, and I just it drove me nuts.
Amazing. Okay. So what about school life? What was that like, going to school in Hollywood or the surrounds?
Yeah, so I was up above it. So it was interesting because some of the kids that were on Full House and stuff like that were
Oh, really?
were at my school, but then they disappear, during filming season, and that became kind of normal. And so like I said, I might have gotten in a little bit of trouble, so I got kicked out of one high school.
True.
And yes, I
Tell us
did.
about that.
Well, that all ties into what I eventually ended up doing. So I helped a friend buy drugs. And so I wasn't purchasing the drugs at that time. And
Are you talking me?
no, meth was the drug of
Whoa.
choice in my hometown.
Oh,
So I helped her purchase meth, and the girl who was selling got busted, and so she took everybody else down. But since I wasn't technically purchasing, I just took the money and gave it to someone else. I just got moved to another school for a semester. So, but it was
what were you?
15. Yeah.
And
So
there was any charges
no,
or
because I
criminal record?
didn't technically touch these things. They were,
Lucky.
yeah. So I was very lucky. I was very
Meth
lucky.
meth was an actual thing.
Oh
Are
yeah.
we talking just the 90s?
Methamphetamine. Yeah. So it was 95.
Goodness.
Yeah, that was all around me. There was every drug you could want was available. I don't think I ever saw anybody on heroin, to be honest.
But how did that even come into your world?
Skinny girls.
God.
Yes. So that was an interesting lesson. I had done it at that time, but then I got kicked out, and I was kind of a mediocre student. And then once I got kicked out, I felt like I needed to prove myself. So I had straight A's. Went to this other high school, which was the high school where what is Miley Cyrus's?
Oh, Hannah Montana.
Yeah, that's where it was filmed. A bunch of Disney
Really?
stuff was
At that
filmed
high
there.
school you went to?
Yeah, it was a really fancy looking high school, and we had a lot of I was playing the DNA in high school because we had this really fancy lab. But then simultaneously, my Spanish class was atrocious, which doesn't help me living here now. We spent a good solid 2 weeks making guacamole. It was really bad. It was like I went from a pretty good school to a very mediocre school, even though it was beautiful, which I think is a good kind of representation of Hollywood.
And was that school also influenced by Hollywood in terms of the drug scene?
There's more drugs
Oh
at
my
that high school.
gosh.
So yeah, my high school was pretty mellow in terms of it was an older school. So my original high school, I went back to it. I was only
Oh,
with the
you
other
did.
one
Oh,
for a
okay.
semester.
Like it was a bit of a bad behavior type of move.
Yeah, it was just like you need to be
Totally.
separated from these people so that you don't continue this behavior. But I had way more drugs accessible to me at that
And were you
school.
taking the drugs as well?
I had taken meth at that time,
Really?
yeah, at 15.
And
Yeah,
did your parents know?
not at that time. My mom was just like, not my daughter. Nope. She was just being so nice. She was helping her friend. And that was the story she needed to tell her son, I
Yeah.
think. But years later, I found out, I think the reason was because my dad actually was involved in drugs and I had no idea. Not like super sophisticated, but he got busted when he was young. And so it was, I think, just like a la 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 la. Like, there's no way our daughter is involved with this. She's just a nice girl. And then I grew up in the rave scene too, which was huge in LA.
Right.
And
Another sort of big drug scene as well, no doubt. Yes.
yeah, and I snuck out to go to those parties. And then I was doing, MDMA and ketamine and lots of different things. And I actually fell in love with dance there. That's where I started dancing. I wasn't
Right.
one of the younger folks that went to, ballet when they were little. I just started dancing and I fell in love with it. And then I told my mom that I was going to raves and I wanted sanctioned okay because I was like, I'm not because I had stopped doing the drugs at that point because I just loved dancing so much.
Do you have an addiction?
No, no, no. I had
Okay.
dabbled and then I got in trouble.
Okay.
And then I was a straight A student. I didn't even drink until after college
Okay.
at that point.
So that move to the other school didn't pull you in further.
No, I just had more access if I wanted it, which was weird. Which was
Okay.
weird.
Yeah.
But
That's
yeah,
interesting.
because it was a bunch of rich kids and then a bunch of pretty poor
Oh
kids
wow.
too. So yeah, so it was like the kids would drive in their brand new Mercedes and BMWs, and then there was like the kids that were a lot of the migrant workers' children that were coming. So it was a lot of fights. Really strange place to move to, and then
Interesting.
went back to my old high school. I started going to raves when I was 17,
Okay.
16, 17. And I started dancing and I just
You didn't do classic dance or
not
so
until
it's just
college.
through right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the
Yeah.
first love affair with dance was through going to raves.
Yes.
Those raves were they 18 plus?
Oh no, these were underground.
These were underground.
This was old 90s raves where you had to
Yes.
go one place and find out where the address was. It was like a scavenger hunt
Oh.
because at any point, because it was illegal, like they could have maybe changed the venue. So they didn't ever publicize the venue because that day it might have changed too.
So what were your friends like? I mean, you obviously had a group that would go and
Yeah, yeah. At that time I had part-time jobs and I worked as a hostess at a restaurant. It's kind of terrible actually because our manager would go with us, so he would kind of close the restaurant a little early. He's like, "Well, we got to get going." Priorities.
it was a movement.
It was. It was.
Movement for the time, yeah.
Yeah.
And so how did that shape you, do you think?
Infinitely, honestly, because then I went to junior college before I went to like a 4 year. I had applied myself. Junior college was also very easy, so that also gave me room to just kind of screw around a little bit because it wasn't hard to get my AA. And so I just I started falling in love with dance. I started to actually take dance classes. And then I think the drugs informed me in a really interesting way because I ended up doing a psychology degree. And I kind of knew I wanted to do that. And dance was kind of like, this is fun. And just enjoyed it for what it was. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do psychology, which I'm grateful I did.
And why psychology?
Well, so my parents were like a little interesting. My father, mostly.
Yeah.
He did grow up in the studios. And don't really know what happened to him, but he had drug problems that we didn't really understand.
Do you think with everything that's come out about Hollywood recent times that potentially is
He was a little boy on a
Mhm.
set, he was the youngest in the family. And
his parents signed him and his brothers up to be extras at young ages?
yes, yes. So my older um uncles were in like White Christmas and those black and white films from like that time. And just like, like the little kids
Yes.
around you know, in the background.
Sure, sure, but also little kids, highly vulnerable.
Yes.
Okay, so
So
what
we can
kind of
sort of
yeah, with the
connect those dots, but it's not official. I don't really know because my father never spoke about it. But
your mum never mentioned
no, my mom was grew up fairly wealthy. My father was pretty poor. That's why they were put in in
extras. Yeah,
yeah, I was like,
makes
how are
sense
you
to
going to
me.
feed four
Yeah.
boys? So my mother grew up, my grandfather was a vice president of a bank and, had a summer home and things like that. Uh, and so it was, marrying the bad boy a little bit, I think.
Yeah, sure. And then with your dad, and you said he was a little interesting.
Yeah, we never really, I did get a psychology degree, so we could go down that path, but I don't think it's useful anymore because people psychologize everything.
Yeah.
I really don't have a name for him anyways, even if I tried to categorize him. But he seemed pretty depressed. But
Oh,
now in retrospect, he died 2 years ago and he had had a stroke and they needed a respirator. And he was trying to pull it out. So they tried to put him under, but they couldn't have so much use of therapy opioids that they had to put him in medicated coma because he had just done so many, and that was when it really sunk in. It's like, oh, dad really is a drug addict because you don't know when you're a little kid. So it looked like depression, but more likely it was
managing trauma.
yeah, yeah, and then the ups and downs of withdrawal and excess. And, he'd be in bed for most of the weekend, and then or he'd be just tinkering away in the garage. So don't really know because when you're a little kid, you're just like,
Of course.
that's weird today.
I mean, you can
New weird.
be quite a good study of your parents later on in life.
Got a whole degree to try to figure this out.
Right. Tell us about the degree.
Well, that was what was interesting, which led me into my world now. I went to Sonoma State University, which is in Northern California.
No?
So I did end up going up to Northern California. And my professors were all the ex trippers in San Francisco. It was only an hour north of San Francisco. It was the San Francisco psychology wing, but then became its own university. So it was had incredible professors. Like yeah, in addition to just being incredible professors, they were also some of the first to do the LSD trials, to do some of the MDMA trials. Were in the previous format of like the therapeutic setting before everything became illegal.
Mm.
And so it was such an interesting like raising up of my beliefs around psychology because I just assumed altered states were part of psychology.
Right.
Then I got internships and was like, oh, we don't do any of this fun stuff. I was a behavioral therapist and I discovered it was the polar opposite. We weren't looking at the whole person, we were just managing behaviors, and I didn't like it.
No. Why did they do that?
That is what was financially viable. It fits in the medical model really well. I have a degree in humanistic psychology, which looks at the whole human, which means time, lots of time. Whereas with behaviors, it's you have to fix this one behavior, so we can give you a protocol for that.
Got you. So they're doing like a process of elimination almost. Do you think they're looking at sort of, well, this is the behavior, let's go there, see how that then is?
Then you can categorize it into a diagnostic model.
Okay.
And so you can, my first client was, so you can't diagnose someone with antisocial until they're 18, but they have I had one that was reactive attachment disorder, and then one that was, I call that disruptive. They changed all the names many times, but it was the precursors to antisocial. I had other kids. I had some other kids that were diagnosed with Tourette's, some other kids that were just diagnosed with depression or ADHD, and all of them were medicated. And that was where I was like, something really wrong, and I didn't like it. I didn't like being responsible for medications. I did dole them out. I prescribed them, but I was
Sure.
doling them out at
Sure.
times, and it's like, this isn't right.
Yeah.
There's something wrong here.
And do you think in that experience you were able to see that the medications were just a band-aid?
Yes. Because one of my clients is 10 years old and on 6 medications. And he was the just firecracker of the household, single mom, two older siblings that were just lumps on the couch. And he just,
Probably ADHD, which
yeah, all kinds of
is
things.
just a personality.
Well, he was the one that was deemed antisocial later. And so some of his ways in the world were very interesting. I remember having a conversation with him because everything was behavioral based. So it's like you can play your video games for 5 minutes if you go and do the social interaction. And he said, well, I just sit here, and if I look sad, other kids will come up to me. Ted Bundy style. I don't know if you know Ted Bundy's way
Yeah.
of alluring. Yeah. And I was like, and hadn't really, in humanistic psychology, we didn't really tend to go towards those diagnostic models, but we were aware of them to be informed. Yeah, he was on so many medications that at one point we said he needs a med holiday so we can see who this kid is.
Yes.
Because he was like up and then down and then all over the place. And he started improving in school. This is a state program, by the way. Started improving. We got him all the way off everything. And he started like just doing all his homework and being really pretty level. But mom did not know how to handle that kind of kid because he was also very intelligent. And so state said, well, he's better. Service isn't required anymore. And that day probably broke my heart. He latched onto my leg. Am I allowed to cuss? But okay. He said, "Fuck, get the fuck out of here. Leave then." As he's holding my leg. And I was like, I can't do this job anymore. I did continue because I was still in school and I was, doing these internships and, but
That's an intense internship. That's a lot for a student and a young woman,
I was
just a
19.
young person. 19. So you finished the degree.
I did. And I did work a little bit as a behavioral therapist in group homes for a period, but then that was when I was really seeing like doling out the medication. So I was with them for 8 hours a day in that scenario, whereas before it was just a couple hours a day. And yeah, I just realized I don't want to be any part of this. And I mean, it took a lot of twisty turns to come around to being, I don't know if you call me, I'm not a medical professional, but I'm a professional in the psychedelic industry because I realized that there's insights and then there's none.
So at what point did you become a professional?
So as I said, I didn't even drink until after college. Really, I did in high school. I did do acid and mushrooms and stuff, but that was still around the time that I was experimenting with other things. I stopped doing everything. And then I did MDMA when I was raving, and ketamine when I was raving. And then when I went to college, I started dancing, and I was doing a dual degree, so I have a BA in dance, yeah, and a BA in psychology. So I was busy.
Yes.
I was like, I didn't even drink coffee.
And what a contrast, can I just say?
Yeah.
It's a good balance.
Yeah, it was because I was I would sit and read and write papers and do all that stuff. And so yeah, it was really nice to have that as the balance. And it was definitely good for my mental health.
Sure, absolutely. Right?
I got that taste in college, and then I left college, did a few years in psychology, and then I was like, no. And I went into sales and business, and then I ran a yoga studio for about 7 years. And I came to find out it was kind of an institution in Berkeley, California. I came to find out later that they used to host DMT sessions there when it was still legal. We had Ram Dass come through. We had Ralph Metzner, which was Larry's kind of right hand man. He was a scientist. Come and do talks, and you had all these incredible minds that came through, and also brilliant yogis and just consciousness exploration people. At this point, this was mid 2000s.
Oh, in 2000.
Yeah, so I started running that in 2007, 2012. We sold it. And it was just like so I got this flavor of like what life was. It was consciousness exploration. I got to really dive back into it. I was like, this is how life is, right? And then I went and like left that and went out and looked in to be like, okay, I'm now 30. My mother had passed by then. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go be like a grown up. And at that time I was also doing real estate. So I'd also like I worked, so the owner of the studio was also a real estate developer, and I poked him for a couple years. Was like, I want to work there. I want to work there. I want to work with you, please. So he finally let me learn real estate development through him. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go be a big girl. Oh my god, I hated that. I hated it. I went into business, and I eventually went into marketing, and I was in the Bay Area, which is Techlandia. So I worked in tech, and I went to a mushroom growing workshop, and I just had this, I don't even know why, because I really didn't, I mean, I liked mushrooms, but I didn't really care to learn that much. But there was something that really my intuition said, go to this. You have to go to this.
Intuition.
Yes. And I met the folks that I then ended up re-enlivening the Psychedelic Society of San Francisco with. And then that was when after, like, as part of that group, we started the legislation in Oakland, which ended up decriminalize nature, ended up going to 65 cities around the US to decriminalize psychedelics. And it was all because we were like, okay, we are all adults and we're all either selling, holding, or supporting people to find these drugs. So, see how that I helped people find
Yes.
drugs.
Wow, it really did have a top and tail, didn't it? Was this around also the time that amazing doco came out, Fantastic Funky?
That was
Did
a little bit
you
later.
have
So
anything to do with him?
no, I meant Paul Stamets. The one that was active at that time was actually it wasn't even a documentary yet. It was Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind.
Oh,
So he was
okay.
doing a talk series about his book, and we had him at this. We did a collaboration with them with the Psychedelic
Right.
Society. So that was more people sort of waking back up to, and not just like trippers, but people who were like, this is for mental health. And the Psychedelic Society, we inherited it from someone who had already created the Psychedelic Society.
Was it back in the 70s? I'm pretty sure I read
Mm,
some information around they were using mushrooms or some psychedelics to help people with personality disorders or PTSD.
So back then, yeah, those were my professors. So they would do high dose LSD with a male and female therapist. So personality disorders is one you can't touch with psychedelics, actually, because there's no sense of self. So it's actually the most difficult and typically the most like harmful for the
Oh,
person too, because you're asking someone to look deeply.
oh, sorry, it was depression.
Oh, depression. Yeah,
Yes.
back in the 70s, it was couples therapy with MDMA,
Uh-huh.
LSD for depression, and also now they've discovered cluster headaches. It's quite similar to that.
Cluster headaches or migraines?
I think they're different. I'm
Okay.
not totally clear, but I think cluster headaches for sure. These days, there's yeah, PTSD is definitely supported through a lot of these substances. Supported. I always want to make sure people understand supported because you're not curing, because it is a reflection of looking into yourself to understand why you had the addiction, why the PTSD is really bothering you, why, there are structural things that change. Your brain does become more malleable so you can learn faster. With the substance that I spent the most time advocating for and working with is iboga and ibogaine. That does actually have a nervous system reset of sorts.
Wow. Now tell us about that. Like Boga?
Iboga is a plant from Africa,
Right.
and so that's the what I call it the mother plant because ibogaine is just one of the some 37 alkaloids that have been found inside the plant. So ibogaine is what most people know about because it is the one that has the most press in the U.S. for sure, Canada as well. It's served in many places here in Mexico, and I've done iboga. I haven't done ibogaine. Iboga is, like I said, the mother. Ibogaine is an extracted alkaloid that's intensified. So in iboga, there's about 9 to 12% ibogaine. Ibogaine extracted is like 90-95% pure ibogaine, which tends to be more predictable because it's not a plant, more intense. Apparently. I don't know how to describe that intensity since I haven't experienced it, but iboga's plenty intense.
Well,
So
tell us about iboga. What was your first experience with that?
so I will summarize. I came to it with PTSD myself. I was in a pretty intensive domestic violence situation. And I actually went to Costa Rica telling the man that I was with that I'll meet you there after I do a boga. Because one of the biggest lessons of understanding that world is that in order to survive, you have to self regulate because you can't let them know. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to do this thing. I'll meet you. And thank God, I ended up, it was friends that served me iboga. They were professionals also, but it ended up being such a blessing because I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. And PTSD is, there's different flavors of it. Most people associate it with war when you think of like the specifics, but I think a lot of people who educate on PTSD, there is no difference between PTSD and complex PTSD, CPTSD, which is people call it childhood PTSD, complex PTSD. It originates with at a time when you are under a high stress situation you can't get out of. So, what are considered the flashbacks are not associated to one memory. Can pinpoint some of the flashbacks. Clear, I know what happened that day. Most folks who have just pure PTSD, or usually there's both, but they can say, I experienced my friends die, or I was in a massive, plane crash or explosion or something, and they can pinpoint that. Complex PTSD is an emotional flood that you can't actually figure out its origin. So all of a sudden, you're just walking down the street and you don't know what sets you off, and so or at home, or
Maybe it's a build up from childhood experiences through to
kind of a combo.
yeah.
So the PTSD kind of made me a shut in. And I feel really blessed because I did house sitting. It was my first house sitting experience. I had done a boga. I had no idea where I was going to live after I left the retreat center. And so I just found this website and I had applied to a house sit. And I was like, I don't know. And then I went into the medicine, which is a 7-day experience.
Oh, what do you mean you went into the medicine?
So a boga is a 72-hour experience, and I
Right.
did it twice in
And how do
7
you do
days.
it? What is the process to
So it's root bark. So they grind up the root of the plant, and you take like handfuls of it,
uh-huh.
and then you can make tea out of that as well. Which is not
Imagine
tasty.
drinking that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
Get the idea.
a very, very bitter bark. Yeah. But also they make an extraction called TA, which is total alkaloids, where they extract all the alkaloids. So you get still all the alkaloids, including ibogaine, in a powder form that they put in capsules.
Okay.
The root bark, as you might imagine, very fibrous, not so easy on the tummy. So you tend to see that pretty quickly after consuming it.
Sure.
It's not fun. But the total alkaloids, it's direct, it's a bit, so you take the root bark first, and that comes on very fast. You go and lay down with the medicine, and then you take the total alkaloids to kind of continue the medicine. And that, my first experience was about 20 hours fully in it. And then you're in it still with those that have had LSD experiences. You kind of tracers of light. You're very light sensitive. You are hyper emotional, I would say. I was. Maybe not everybody
So a
was.
lot of crying and
Um, extraordinary sensitivity. It can be crying, it can be rage, it can be, you're faced with yourself. When you're in the medicine, you have vision. Not everybody has visions. I had very intense visions. When those tend to fade after the 20-25 hours, then you're left in what people call the gray day, which is the discovery day of what's underneath. And it can look different for everybody, but I was every negative thought, every insult I had heard, every horrible experience was flooding me, and I didn't have the beauty of the visions. You're just
You're in it.
you're in it.
Oof.
And that's why it's not recreational.
Yeah.
Mushrooms can be fun, MDMA can be fun.
Sure. This
All
is going deep and really peeling back a lot of layers.
yes.
Was there more in there, or was this strictly, do you think, to do with the relationship?
Oh no. Way back.
Right.
Because you have to understand also why you got yourself in that situation.
Of course.
You know, because I didn't understand. I it was COVID. It seemed like a good idea to move out of California for the first time in my life and go to Tennessee because COVID, right? California was nuts.
Nuts.
Tennessee was much more lax. I thought, sure.
An adventure too. Right?
And an adventure, never moved out of California. That's also isolation. And it made it so that there was also no one for me to reach when stuff got bad. And his father was dying through the whole relationship, through 9 months of the relationship. And we were 6 months long distance. So I didn't really know who he was. And so you discover these things. But then when you're in the medicine, the predispositions for, like, well, my dad was really in certain ways in his world. Um, he was very grief stricken because his father died before I was born. His best friend died of a heroin overdose.
As in, this is your
My father. My father.
Yes.
And so my father had deep, deep grief. And I was with someone who was in the process of grieving his father who was dying. So it was very similar. You let people get away with a lot when you think, well, they're just grieving.
It's your way of being able to support someone.
Yeah, you get confused.
Yes.
You know, and also COVID was a very weird thing for everyone. You know, I think everyone has a little tinge of the PTSD, PTSDisms, you know, after that experience because you're isolated. Intentionally, the entire society was. And there's grief around what you thought was normal. And I think that's the way I would summarize PTSD is that you experience things that you didn't even have a thought were possible. And then your paradigm shifts and you don't have an organization of your world anymore. Yes. And Iboga is an organizing factor. That's why it's so effective. Is it quite literally reorganizes your system and your mind. Not permanently, but it gives you a way of sort of stepping back and it does some very interesting things other psychedelics don't do. It reorganizes things to the point where I couldn't watch TV because it was too stimulating. Because my system was so downregulated that I started to share that I had a house sit. I ended up getting a 6-month long house sit on a lake. And so I was able to just recuperate after and hide out and sit. And I just talked to the frogs at night. I'm a little alligator friend. I was very lucky because I know most men and women, you know, after those situations, any kind of extreme trauma, you can't just take 6 months off, you know, because my rent was paid for essentially. House sitting, right? So I still worked a bit, but it was rough to do it. But Iboga, I think it did move the needle for me. Now I've done it 7 times. Can't say I'm healed.
Well, do we ever truly heal?
That's also something that, yes, exactly. How do you like quantify healing? How do you say, okay, well, I reached this point. How do you state this is the destination? Because there's always more to learn.
There's always more, and you're always peeling back and discovering more about yourself. Right? So, 7 times on the Iboga, and where do you think you are now?
Oh God, infinitely different for sure. But that was 4 years ago.
Okay.
I've also
So it's 4 years, 7 Ibogas over 4 years. Okay,
yeah,
great.
yeah, and you do 2 floods at once. So that one ceremony was 2 separate occasions, and then the last one was last November, and I did 2 more flood doses. And you don't have to take floods; you can microdose, but it is one that does require medical care because it is something that it has a lot of layers to it. It's not dangerous necessarily in and of itself, but it has a lot of contraindications. And so if you have other things in your system, I can't even take my supplements for doing it.
Okay.
So it's
And coming out of this 7th month, what shifted for you?
this last two were really interesting because I asked it to heal my body, which was very curious because it didn't give me any visions. It was like, sorry, busy. And so I almost couldn't tell I was in the medicine. And then I sat up and you do feel kind of dizzy. And I sat up and I said, I don't think it's working. They're like, I was like, I don't know. And then entered a 3 hour long period of not having any thoughts, not a single one. It started in kind of in a slow way that a thought would come and a hand would come and go whoop, and pull it out. I'm like, what's that thought? That's weird. So it's a very mind oriented medicine. And although it was working on my body as well, which is very strange, I didn't know what it was doing, but I just said, heal whatever you can. And when I got back from that session, I started dancing again.
Oh,
First
wow.
time since 30, age
Wow.
30.
Can I just ask, did you have any physical ailments or anything in particular that you thought your body needed healing?
I have a lot of injuries from dance.
Oh,
And so I've had really pretty significant chronic pain
okay.
for a long time. I also had some I get numbness in my extremities and variations, like fluctuations in energy levels, kind of excessive energy, I would say, which you could say is hypervigilance, but I would say it just got a lot of energy. I just do. I've always been like early to bed, up really early. It's just that,
Get on with the day.
let's
That's
go.
great though. What a wonderful predisposition.
Yeah, yeah. Not everybody enjoys it. Not everybody likes a morning person. Not everybody loves that I would walk 10 miles a day.
Wow. Ooh.
I was a very, very, very active. So during that 4 year period, I slept at the beginning for maybe 2 hours at a time. So, and then I would take a nap, do an hour. Like that was, it was really spotty. I got to a point where I was able to kind of sleep a bit more, but I have to walk excessively so I could sleep. And so I did kind of was like, could we maybe slow this roll a little bit? Like whatever is going on in here, could we regulate my system a bit more? Because I felt like my knees, my back couldn't take walking 10 miles
Yes.
a day. And also you have to work at some point.
Yes. Were you wanting to walk so much? Was it that it was a flood of thoughts that needed to be walked out? Was there sort of an activity associated with feeling better? Clearing your mind?
It,
Clearing your...
it was to a degree. It was definitely it's the time I process when I'm moving I process.
Yeah.
But there was still, unfortunately, that partner stalked me for the last 4 years, in various ways, which has opened the door to a lot of travel. So I lived in 7 different countries in the last 4 years as well. And
Is this because you're worried for
yeah,
yourself?
I wanted to be moving target. So there was like two sides of it. It was like, I can make the best out of this and just go explore the world, because I did spend 6 months hiding, and I was like, I don't want to live like this. So I was like, well, I'll just travel, and that's been the greatest gift. And that has its own interesting side because you're always in the booth, you're living out of a suitcase, and nothing's ever stable. And I think that's part of the movement was I was just so habituated to it. And that's also for a lot of people with PTSD, you either crash really hard or you don't stop moving. Because if you're moving, you're ahead of the unsafe thing, whatever it is.
Right.
So it's very interesting how that plays out.
Do you feel like you still need to be on the move?
Not as much. Thank God. I dance in the morning on my rooftop deck, and then I have my morning coffee, and I'll check my email, and I trade as well. So I'll check like markets and stuff, and check in with clients, and I still do marketing. I'm back in legislation to a degree as well for ibogaine in the U.S.
So you've become quite, I guess, involved with this psychedelic, and what kind of marketing and how did that come about? You went down that path.
I was doing the decriminalized nature legislation back in Oakland, and that was 2017, I think, 2018. And I was doing tech marketing, and some folks were like, "Do you think maybe you could like, just tell me what you would do?" You know. And so in tech, it's pretty cut and dry. Like it's pretty cookie cutter what you do in marketing as a digital marketing person strategist. It is not when you're dealing with illegal keywords and illegal substances.
Yes.
Obviously, you have to leave the country in order to do it, you know, and then there's people who want to stay in America and, you know, I can't market you. I can't say you're
Yeah.
a provider because I can't put that anywhere. You know, you'd be targeted potentially. And so
And they all have to be FDA approved, right? Is that
none of them are. Yeah,
right?
they're all Schedule 1
TBG.
yeah, where everything's still Schedule 1.
Yeah.
There are certain so decriminalizing is not legalizing. Decriminalizing means if you have personal use amount, then they're not going to write you a ticket just for that or take you to jail just for that. That leaves the door open to people sitting with you and you provide your own medicine. So that's made access a little bit easier. But you still can't market a retreat inside the United States. Even if, like, I had a client in the Bahamas where it is actually legal to serve psilocybin, fully legal, above board, no problem, don't care, totally tourist dollar move. But we're looking for clients from the US. And so you can't market that the same. So it's tricky.
Yes, it's really tricky. If someone listening to this and saying, "Wow, I would really love to try this psychedelic," where would they go? How would they find a space where they could?
So I would say, so for Iboga and Ibogaine, it is cardiotoxic. So that is something I alluded to, that it's got a lot of contraindications. The problem with this one is that it can stop your heart, or rather, it can cause arrhythmias during the medicine itself. Sometimes predictable, sometimes not. So you do need a medical staff. So in Mexico, there are many places. There's places in Canada. They're kind of gray territory. There's some places in, I think, in the Bahamas, definitely some of the Caribbean islands, Dominica. There are places, Malta, that it's fully legal above board, so you can do it in a medical setting. Brazil. So we work with a Brazilian doctor who they never schedule it in Brazil. He's been serving it inside of a hospital for 30 years.
Wow, wow.
Not a single death. Now, gray area, underground, which underground are my people. Totally my people. But in this situation, you do need to be careful.
Okay.
So, and, you know, I'm happy to give my contact because I know those people who are safe.
Yeah.
Not everybody's created equal. It's
No.
particularly because it is associated with addiction as well.
Right.
People get desperate.
Can you get addicted to this?
No, no. It is the antithesis of addiction
Right.
because not only is it not much fun, it can be beautiful, but it's not fun.
Okay.
It actually interrupts the addiction patterns, which is really beautiful because there's a mental pathway that you keep running the same loop when you're in an addictive pattern. And not only does it almost force you to think about it differently, it also interrupts it to a degree. So just like for those that know about other psychedelics, DMT is present in the brain and in the lungs of a human being in almost every plant. Most mammals, it is responsible for our dreams. It's also present in psilocybin, you know, DMT, ayahuasca, other things. Ibogaine is present in the liver. Neuroibogaine exists in your liver. So when you metabolize ibogaine, it supercharges your liver in a way. So you get a huge amount that then is helping to detox it out of the body. So it does help the detox process. It also is regulating a lot of your because your hormones are because it's your liver does so many things, but it's regulating your fat absorption, which is mostly what our hormones are doing.
Yes.
So you're regulating a lot of your system that way.
Would you say it's good for women who are maybe entering
menopause?
Yes.
So in a lot of ways, yes, because you're also, I can't say because there's not enough definitive proof exactly, you know, that you're
Yes.
still entering into the phase of receiving research grants for this.
Interesting.
So on the mental, absolutely. Physiologically, absolutely. It
Oh,
is, it is an aphrodisiac
oh, wow.
in Africa. It does. I had a friend who had a oopsie baby at 45.
Wow.
We've been serving iboga for a number of years because your system works a bit better.
Yes.
Yeah,
Supercharging the system, it sounds like.
yeah.
Interesting. So for you, that's now done 7 of the iboga ceremony. Would that be a ceremony?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do it in the Bhutis tradition, so
Okay.
which is the people in Africa who serve this medicine and hold this.
Have you always done your ceremony here in Mexico?
I did in Costa Rica and Mexico.
Okay. All right. And so if you're American wanting to do the ceremony,
You could go to Africa, you could go to Mexico, you could go to a number of different
do
places.
they do them here in Puerto Vallarta?
I don't know any reputable ones here in Puerto Vallarta. They have some in San Pancho, which is about
Oh,
an hour and a half north.
so.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And
Interesting.
then there's people who come here and do retreats, so they're not here all the time. But,
Right.
yeah.
And with regards to the heart, would it be that somebody has already some heart issues that potentially could?
Yes, you need to do an EKG and a full
Oh,
blood panel before you
right,
even
right.
go in.
Okay.
And often those that have addiction problems already have a weakened system.
Yeah.
That's typically
see.
where it comes from.
I see.
Yeah, and also there's applications for Parkinson's. There's applications for a lot of neurodegenerative
Wow.
diseases.
So tell me about Mexico. How did you land here? Is this part of your moving around, but why in particular Puerto Vallarta?
I came down here when I was 18,
Mm.
and I just had such fond memories of it. And I came down one other time prior to like making this like a home base. I still traveled. I still don't have residency. I still bounce back up, border cross. I just fell in love with it. There's something really special about this place, and it's also really easy without a car. It is the destination from LA too.
Mhm.
So I often feel like a little bit of like familiarity, and just reminiscent of home. I mean,
It's beautiful.
it's beautiful. I can see the mountains and the beach from my place. It's affordable, not in comparison to other places in Mexico, but
Mhm.
I love the people. So kind.
Mhm.
I feel extraordinarily safe. I lived in Oakland. I lived in, San Francisco and LA. Not safe places. Not
Yes.
safe places. I feel very safe here as a woman. As just I don't feel like judged. I get smiles
Mhm.
from everyone walking down the street.
Mm.
I can remember a time when I didn't even make eye contact, with people. And this has changed my heart being here. Just my soul is happy. It's so interesting because I would long for it when I wasn't here. So it's been like 4 years that I've been bouncing.
Mhm.
I met my now best friend here. And I just feel grounded, and I for somebody who moved as much as I did, I finally unpacked my bags for the first time in December and had a lease.
Wow.
For the first time.
Mm.
And I couldn't think of any other place I'd want to do that.
Yeah.
I feel really comfortable here. And people talk a lot about the healing nature of this place, but I've also seen the flip side of it, which is the destructive aspect to it. I think there's a really beautiful death and resurrection element.
Isn't that?
Yeah. But it was a place that I came here right after Boga. And then I flew to Florida after that. The first time I did Boga. I've come back after Boga here many times. I mean, I don't know if Iboga has got me on a different path. Clearly, it's got its mind of its own. I'm apparently back in legislation doing, stuff, which is great. I love it. Um, I'm still not sure why I'm here. To be complete, other than when I'm not, I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So for you now, when do you feel you're sitting in your life?
Amazing. Honestly, I am so insanely grateful. My world is opened because I'm trading. I have time freedom for the most part. So like 5 hours a week trading, and that's my income. I like doing other things, but I get to choose those things. The things that make my heart light up, which is I can't even tell you how different. At the beginning of COVID, I had brick and mortar clients. So guess who goes away first? The marketing lady. I lost all my clients. I moved across the country. I was living off whatever stipend that was given at the beginning of COVID. I was in a wildly different place. Now I could be anywhere in the world and I choose to be here. I have an incredible community here. That's something I think that Iboga teaches in its core because it's really self-oriented, but no one's an island. And the way that we teach serve the medicine, you're all laying in a room together. You sit around a fire together. I think in the clinical models, I think people are going to start to shift away from that. But even still, the way they're serving it here in Mexico, you're all laying together. That's really important. And community's been everything, particularly this past couple of years.
So, for watching this, or anyone watching this right now, what advice would you give somebody who's maybe got some PTSD or is going through a hard time or is looking for a big change?
It's a hard go to come sight unseen. Come and test drive a place for a period of time before you hack your entire life up. If you are dealing with something with like PTSD or you're dealing with, some of the things I shared, you're probably going to be locking yourself away somewhere. So you might as well be walking distance from a beach, to be completely honest. But, it is a rough go without community. If you already have one, go explore. Go test drive new places because every part of Mexico is different. Every country is different. Even here, like if you happen to be, LGBTQ, you're going to have a totally different experience in Vallarta than straight folks. There's a huge community. This is one of the few places in Mexico that is, so gay friendly. We can go dancing with a bunch of men. You get to have fun. But because you don't have support system fully, you're people speaking a different language when you're walking around. I think if you're in a transition, listen to your intuition, listen to your heart. This is going to confuse you. Sit with this, listen. Get really good at listening because you'll know what's right for you. Go find your yes. Go find your body will tell you when it's in the right place. Yes, absolutely. It's a process.
Thank you. This has been a beautiful chat, you wild woman. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.